Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for more stories. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Brian Holloway stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his police chief's badge with practiced precision. 22 years of service had taught him the weight of this symbol, not just the metal pin to his chest, but the responsibility it carried. At 42, his face bore the marks of countless investigations, interrogations, and tough decisions. His dark eyes remained sharp, missing nothing. The Fairview Police Department respected him not because of the 4 stars on his collar, but because he'd earned every promotion through unwavering integrity. He'd started as a beat cop walking the streets of this Ohio town when it was still struggling with petty crime and small-time contraband dealers. Now, as chief, he maintained order through a combination of strategic policing and zero tolerance for corruption. Heading out early, Lauren's voice carried from their bedroom. His wife of 17 years stood in the doorway, her blonde hair perfectly styled for another day of teaching at Fairview High School. "Contraband bust planning meeting," Brian replied, his tone professional even with his wife. "We've got intel about new players moving into the county." Lauren nodded, but Brian noticed her slight eye roll. These micro-expressions had become more frequent lately. Small tells that something had shifted in their relationship. He filed away the observation just as he did with every detail in his investigations. "Mom, Dad, have you seen my history textbook?" Madison's voice echoed from upstairs. Their 17-year-old daughter bounded down the stairs, her backpack half-zipped. She shared Lauren's striking blue eyes, but had Brian's dark hair and determined jaw. "Check under your gym bag," Brian suggested, remembering where he'd seen it the night before. Madison's face lit up as she retrieved the book. "Thanks, Dad. You notice everything." She hugged him quickly before grabbing her lunch from the counter. Lauren watched their interaction with an unreadable expression. "I've got yoga after school, then I'm meeting some friends from the fitness center." Brian nodded, noting how these after-school activities had multiplied recently. Lauren had always been fit, but lately she'd become obsessed with working out. Her new wardrobe consisted mainly of designer athletic wear, and she spent more time at the local gym than at home. "New friends?" he probed gently, his investigator's instincts tingling. "Just some people from Tyler's CrossFit classes. You met him at the fundraiser last month." Tyler Bennett. Brian remembered the man, 33, built like a fitness model, with a smile that seemed practiced for maximum effect. He'd opened Fairview CrossFit 10 months ago, and it had quickly become the go-to spot for the town's professionals. "Right. The new trainer," Brian said neutrally, watching Lauren's reaction. She busied herself with her phone, but he caught the slight flush in her cheeks. "He's more than just a trainer," Lauren said, a defensive edge in her voice. "He's a business owner, and he's done amazing things for the community. You should see how he's helped some of your officers get into better shape." Brian maintained his composed expression, but internally, he noted the unnecessary defense of Tyler's credentials, another data point in a growing collection of concerns. At the station, Brian immersed himself in work. The recent surge in high-purity contraband worried him. Fairview had always had its share of substance abuse issues, but lately the quality and quantity suggested organization and money behind the trade. Officer Daniel Ortiz knocked on his office door. "Chief, we've got those surveillance photos from the warehouse district." Brian examined the photos carefully. Luxury cars visiting an abandoned storage facility at odd hours. He recognized some of the vehicles as belonging to Fairview's upper-crust doctors, lawyers, and business owners. "Run the plates anyway," he ordered, "and get me everything you can on new businesses in town, especially ones that deal primarily in cash." "Yes, sir." Ortiz hesitated. "Chief, there's something else. Some of these cars, I've seen them at that new CrossFit place." Brian's head snapped up, but his voice remained steady. "Document everything. Times, dates, patterns. And Ortiz, keep this between us for now." That evening, Brian drove home later than usual. He'd spent hours reviewing case files, looking for connections he might have missed. The house was quiet when he arrived, too quiet for a Monday evening, when Madison usually practiced her violin. He found a note on the kitchen counter. "At the gym with Mom, back by 9. Love, Madison." Brian checked his watch. 8:10 p.m. He used the time to conduct a careful inspection of his home office. Something had been nagging at him. An investigator's sixth sense developed over decades of police work. The file cabinet lock showed no signs of tampering, but when he checked his recent case files, subtle differences caught his attention. Papers aligned too perfectly, folders too neatly arranged. Someone had been reviewing his documents and taking extraordinary care to replace them exactly. He pulled out his phone and texted Madison. "Everything okay?" Her response came quickly. "Fine, Mom's talking to Tyler about my fitness plan. He says I have potential for athletic scholarship." Brian read the message twice, his jaw tightening. Lauren hadn't mentioned any plans for Madison to train at the gym. He began photographing his case files, documenting their exact placement. Tomorrow, he would install cameras, small, unobtrusive ones that Lauren wouldn't notice. The front door opened, and he heard Madison's excited chatter mixed with Lauren's laughter. He closed the file cabinet silently and headed downstairs. "Dad, you should have seen Mom in class today. Tyler says she's one of his best students," Madison gushed. Lauren's face glowed with exercise and something else, an excitement Brian hadn't seen in years. She wore new workout clothes that probably cost more than her weekly teaching salary. "Tyler's thinking of sponsoring some students for competition training," Lauren said, not quite meeting Brian's eyes. "He thinks Madison has real potential." "Interesting," Brian replied, his tone giving nothing away. "I'd like to discuss that with him personally." "He said you'd say that." Madison bounced on her toes. "He wants to meet with you this weekend to go over the program." Brian smiled at his daughter while his mind raced through scenarios and possibilities. Looking forward to it. Later that night, as Lauren slept, Brian sat in his home office reviewing his notes. His laptop displayed Tyler Bennett's business records, everything perfectly legal on the surface. Too perfect, perhaps. He opened a secure email and sent a message to an old friend at the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. "Need unofficial background check, Private Tyler Bennett, Fairview CrossFit. Full workup." The reply came within minutes. "Give me 36 hours, you okay?" Brian stared at the family photo on his desk, taken just last year, all three of them smiling at his department summer picnic. His response was brief. Just being thorough. He closed his laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. In 22 years of law enforcement, he'd learned that betrayal never announced itself. It crept in through small changes, tiny inconsistencies, and careful manipulations. He'd seen it destroy other men's lives, men who chose to ignore their instincts in favor of trust. Brian Holloway had not survived and thrived as a police chief by ignoring his instincts. And right now, every instinct he possessed was screaming that his family was in danger, not from outside threats, but from choices being made under his own roof. He returned to bed, lying next to the woman he loved for 17 years, and began to plan. If his suspicions proved correct, there would be no half measures, no forgiveness, no second chances. Brian Holloway had built his reputation on justice, but justice without power was just wishful thinking. Tomorrow, he would begin gathering that power. And if anyone had betrayed him, wife, friend, or stranger, they would learn why Fairview's criminals feared its police chief's reputation for absolute, unwavering justice. The rain drummed against the windows of Brian's office as he reviewed the latest surveillance reports. The background check on Tyler Bennett had raised several red flags. Unexplained cash deposits, connections to known contraband traffickers in Cleveland, and a pattern of opening gyms that mysteriously closed after 20 months. His phone buzzed, a text from Lauren. Working late, parent-teacher conferences. Brian checked the school calendar on his desktop. No conferences scheduled this week. Another lie to add to his growing collection. The phone rang again, Madison's ringtone. He answered immediately, his instincts firing at the panic in her voice. "Daddy." Her whisper was barely audible. "Something's wrong. I came home early because I felt sick, and there are weird noises downstairs. 2 cars I don't recognize are in the driveway. Mom told me to stay in my room, but I got scared and climbed out onto the garage roof. I can see inside the dining room window, and there are people in there with papers everywhere." Brian's training kicked in instantly. "Madison, listen carefully. Are you safe where you are?" "Yes. I'm hidden behind the chimney." "Good girl. Stay there. I'm coming with backup. If anyone tries to reach the roof, you run to the Wilsons' house next door. Understand?" "Yes, Daddy. Please hurry." Brian's voice remained steady as he radioed dispatch. "This is Chief Holloway. I need all available units at 1625 Birch Lane. Possible home invasion. Suspects on premises. My daughter is on scene. She's secure but exposed. Roll silent until my signal." He grabbed his tactical vest and was moving before he finished speaking. Officer Ortiz fell into step beside him in the parking lot. "Take separate cars. Brian ordered. Cover the back. If anyone tries to run, detain with maximum force. These people are in my house with my daughter at risk. I'm not feeling gentle. 6 patrol cars converged on the quiet street from different directions, lights off, surrounding the house with practiced precision. Brian approached his front door, weapon drawn, Ortiz and 2 other officers flanking him. The door was locked. Brian used his key, turning it silently. Hand signals coordinated the entry team. They swept in room by room until voices from the dining room froze them in place. The files have to be perfect, Lauren's voice carried clearly. One mistake and he'll notice. Relax, a male voice answered Tyler Bennett. Once we get the evidence planted, the FBI won't care about your husband's reputation. They'll be too busy building their case against him. The seizure records are the key. A woman's voice cut in. Vanessa's right. Yes, Lauren agreed. If it looks like Brian's been tampering with evidence, Brian stepped into the doorway, weapon trained on Tyler. Police. Hands where I can see them. The scene burned itself into his memory. Lauren in her gym clothes, Tyler in an expensive suit, and Vanessa Harper, his business partner, surrounded by police files spread across his dining room table. Crime scene photos, evidence logs, and confidential informant reports littered the surface. Lauren's face drained of color. Brian, this isn't we were just shut up. Brian's voice could have frozen hell. Hands behind your heads. All of you. Ortiz read them their rights. Someone get my daughter inside. Tyler's composure cracked. You don't understand, he's been investigating us so you decided to break into my home? Brian's laugh held no humor. With my daughter here? That was your solution? Please, Lauren stepped forward. We can explain everything Brian cut her off. Add child endangerment to their charges, and conspiracy to tamper with evidence, and theft of confidential police documents. In fact, call the FBI. They'll want to take this case personally. Ortiz efficiently cuffed all 3 suspects while Brian coordinated with the other officers. Crime scene technicians arrived to document and collect evidence. Through it all, Brian maintained his professional demeanor, even as he watched his wife of 17 years being led to a patrol car in handcuffs. Madison ran to him as soon as she was brought inside, throwing herself into his arms. Dad, I'm so sorry. I saw Mom taking pictures of your files last week, but I didn't want to believe you did exactly right today. Brian held her tight. You stayed safe and called for help. That's all that matters. Later that night, after Madison was asleep at his sister's house, Brian sat in his office at the station reviewing interview transcripts. The conspiracy unveiled itself in ugly detail. Tyler's gym had been laundering money for a contraband operation. When he discovered Brian was investigating several of his wealthy clients, he'd seduced Lauren, using her access to Brian's files to build a false case against him. They planned to frame him for evidence tampering, destroying his credibility before he could complete his investigation. Ortiz stood in the doorway. FBI is here. They want to talk about Tyler Bennett. Brian nodded. Give them everything. And, Ortiz, thank you for having my back today. Always, sir. The young officer hesitated. What they tried to do to you, it's not right. No, Brian agreed, his voice cold. It's not. And they're going to learn exactly how not right it was. After the FBI interview, Brian drove home to collect some clothes for Madison. The house felt different now, violated, not just by strangers, but by betrayal. In the dining room, he found Lauren's phone, overlooked in the chaos of the arrests. He unlocked it easily. Her password was still Madison's birthday. The messages and emails confirmed everything. Lauren had been feeding information to Tyler for months, her initial attraction to him growing into a partnership in crime. Brian forwarded everything to his secure email, documenting the conspiracy. Then he opened his own phone and made a call. Mark, it's Brian Holloway. Remember that favor you owe me from the Hawthorne case? I need some information about a federal judge named Victor Langston. Yes, that's right. The one assigned to my wife's case. He paused, eyes hard. I think you'll find his connection to Tyler Bennett very interesting. He ended the call and stood in his silent house, surrounded by the wreckage of his marriage and the remnants of his trust. Tomorrow, the media would explode with the story. His daughter would face whispers at school. His officers would walk on eggshells around him. But tonight, Brian Holloway began planning his response. They hadn't just betrayed his trust. They threatened his daughter, endangered his career, and tried to destroy everything he built. Their mistake wasn't in choosing him as an enemy. Their mistake was in thinking the law was his only weapon. The processing room at the Fairview Police Department hummed with tension as Brian watched through one-way glass. Lauren sat handcuffed to the table. Her designer gym wear had been replaced by standard-issue orange coveralls. Her mascara had smeared from crying, but Brian felt nothing as he observed her. Deputy Chief Angela Park approached with a tablet. "We finished cataloging the documents found at your residence." They photographed virtually everything from the past 7 months of contraband investigations. Brian reviewed the inventory with clinical detachment. Cross-referenced these with all cases involving Tyler Bennett's gym members. "Already started, sir." Park hesitated. Mrs. Holloway's phone revealed regular meetings with Judge Langston's wife at the gym. They apparently had the same personal training slot. Interesting. Brian's voice remained neutral, but his mind raced with implications. "Get me Judge Langston's financial records." In the interrogation room, Lauren's lawyer had arrived. Alan Prescott, one of Fairview's most expensive criminal defense attorneys. Brian recognized him from the country club crowd that frequented Tyler's gym. "I want to speak to my husband," Lauren demanded as Brian entered the room. "Brian, please. This isn't what you think." Brian sat down across from her, his face impassive. "Mrs. Holloway, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." "Chief Holloway," Prescott interjected, "given the personal nature of this situation personal?" Brian's quiet tone cut through the room like a blade. "Breaking into my home with my daughter present, stealing confidential police files, conspiring to obstruct justice. Nothing about this is personal, counselor. This is a criminal conspiracy that endangered a minor." Lauren's face crumpled. "I never meant for Madison to be there." "Yet she was," Brian said. "She watched her mother betray everything I've taught her about right and wrong. About loyalty. About trust." Brian opened a folder. "Let's discuss your meetings with Vanessa Harper at Judge Langston's house." Prescott's eyes widened slightly. Information they hadn't expected Brian to have. "My client exercises her right to remain silent." "Of course." Brian stood. "You should know that the FBI is very interested in Judge Langston's connection to Mr. Bennett's enterprise. They'll be interviewing all involved parties extensively." He left Lauren crying in the interrogation room, her lawyer already on his phone in the hallway. Ortiz waited with more files. "Tyler Bennett is demanding a deal," Ortiz reported. "Says he has information about bigger players in the contraband trade." "Let him stew," Brian replied. "Check his visitor logs at the holding cell. I want to know everyone he's tried to contact the next 36 hours. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of investigations, interviews, and evidence processing. Brian worked, building a case that would destroy not just the immediate conspirators, but their entire network. He was walking to his car late Wednesday night when he heard footsteps in the parking garage. His instinct screamed a warning seconds before the first attacker emerged from behind a concrete pillar. Brian recognized Cody Landry's muscled-framed former MMA fighter, now a trainer at Tyler's gym. 2 more men flanked him, moving with the confidence of trained fighters. "Should have stayed out of it, Chief," Landry growled. Brian dropped his briefcase, his movement deliberate. 3 against 1 hardly seemed fair. "Life ain't fair," one of Landry's companions sneered, throwing the first punch. Brian had spent 22 years training for moments like this. He blocked the strike and countered with brutal efficiency, driving his elbow into the man's throat. The attacker stumbled back, gasping. Landry and his other companion rushed in together. A boot caught Brian's ribs, sending pain shooting through his chest. He rolled with the impact, years of defensive training taking over. Brian fought with the same methodical precision he brought to investigations. Each movement had purpose. Each strike targeted vulnerable points. He couldn't match their raw strength, but he had something they didn't: decades of real combat experience. The first attacker was still down, clutching his throat. Brian focused on Landry's companion, blocking a wild haymaker and retaliating with a precise strike to the knee. Cartilage popped audibly. Landry proved more challenging. His MMA training showed in his balanced stance and calculated attacks. A punch slipped through Brian's guard, splitting his lip. Brian spat blood and countered, but Landry's youth and training gave him an edge. The sound of a door opening echoed through the garage. "Police! Freeze!" Ortiz stood with his weapon drawn, 2 other officers flanking him. Landry hesitated, giving Brian the opening he needed. Brian's punch caught Landry's jaw with full force, dropping the fighter to the concrete. Perfect timing, Brian said, wiping blood from his mouth. Followed a hunch, sir. Ortiz helped him up. You okay? Brian assessed his injuries: bruised ribs, split lip, various contusions. Nothing broken. I'm fine. Get these 3 booked. Assault on a police officer, conspiracy, whatever else we can add. Already called for backup, Ortiz said. He supervised as the other officers cuffed the attackers. You sure you don't need medical attention? Later, Brian retrieved his briefcase. This attack was coordinated. Check their phones. Find out who ordered it. In the hospital later that night, as doctors wrapped his ribs and treated his cuts, Brian made his decision. Ortiz, he called to the officer waiting outside his room. Got a minute? Ortiz entered, his young face concerned. Chief Dash, I'm taking early retirement, Brian stated flatly. After this mess is cleaned up. Ortiz looked shocked. You can't let them win. I'm not. Brian's smile held no warmth. I'm just changing the rules of engagement. How'd you like to move into private security? Understanding dawned in Ortiz's eyes. Whatever you need, sir. I owe you my career. Good. Brian lay back, his mind already mapping out the next phase of his response to the betrayal. The law would handle the criminal charges, but some debts required more personal collection methods. Ortiz interrupted his thoughts. Your daughter's here. Madison entered, her face pale but determined. Dad, those men who hurt you, they worked for Tyler, didn't they? Yes. She nodded, her jaw set in a familiar expression of resolve. I want to learn how to fight. Real fighting, not just gimmick class stuff. Brian studied his daughter, seeing the steel beneath her fear. We'll start tomorrow. As Madison hugged him carefully, mindful of his injuries, Brian felt the last traces of his old life fall away: the trustworthy police chief, the forgiving husband, the by-the-book enforcer. Those roles had died in a reign of betrayal and violence. What emerged was something harder, more focused, and infinitely more dangerous. The doctors kept him overnight for observation, but Brian didn't sleep. He used the time to plan each detail, arranged with the same precision he'd brought to his police work. But these plans wouldn't be constrained by regulations or procedures. They'd chosen their weapons: deceit, manipulation, and betrayal. He would respond with truth, justice, and absolute retribution. The game had changed, and Brian Holloway intended to rewrite all the rules. Brian Holloway sat in his home office, surrounded by walls of evidence. His ribs still ached from the parking garage attack, but pain had become a useful reminder of why he couldn't afford mercy. For weeks had passed since the arrests, and he'd used his medical leave constructively. Another delivery from the courthouse, Daniel Ortiz announced, dropping a thick envelope on Brian's desk. Judge Langston's financial records for the past 6 years. Brian examined the documents. Look at these deposits, all from shell companies tied to Tyler's gym. Speaking of Tyler, Daniel pulled out his phone. I've been tracking his visitors. Bethany Foster showed up yesterday, that teacher who does his books. Lauren's friend. Brian's interest sharpened. Follow her. Daniel nodded. Already did. She went straight to the high school, then to the gym. Spent 4 hours in the office there. Get me everything on Bethany Foster. Tax returns, bank statements, phone records. She's our way into their operation. Brian spread out surveillance photos across his desk. Tyler's gym had become a hub of activity despite its owner's incarceration. Luxury cars still filled the parking lot at odd hours. The gym's revenue hasn't dropped, Daniel noted. Someone's still running the operation. Vanessa Harper. Brian pulled out her file. She's not just Tyler's business partner. Look at her college records: degree in finance from Duke, internships at major banks. She's the brains behind their money laundering. A knock at the door interrupted them. Madison stood in the doorway, dressed in workout clothes. Dad, I'm heading to my karate class. Brian studied his daughter. The past weeks had aged her, replacing her teenage softness with something harder. I'll drive you. At the dojo, Brian watched Madison attack the punching bag with focused rage. Her instructor, a former Marine, approached Brian. She's got natural talent, the instructor observed. And motivation. She needs to be able to defend herself, Brian replied. From what I hear, the instructor said, gesturing to Brian's healing injuries, she's not the only one. My advanced class includes tactical defense. Private lessons. Brian considered the offer. Send me the details. Back home, Daniel had news. Bethany Foster cracked. Wasn't hard, she's terrified of going to prison. Tell me. Lauren met Tyler through her last year. He offered free personal training sessions to teachers, but Bethany says it was targeted. He knew Lauren was your wife, knew she had access to your files. Brian's expression remained neutral, but his fingers tightened on his desk. Go on. Bethany handled the gym's books, but there were two sets: the official numbers and the real operation. High-end contraband dealing to Fairview's elite. Lauren wasn't just passing information. She was helping launder money through fake fitness competitions. Who else was involved? That's the interesting part. Daniel leaned forward. Bethany says Tyler's operation has protection. Judge Langston isn't their only friend in high places. Brian pulled out his phone, dialing a number he rarely used. Agent Collins. I need to cash in that favor from the Carson investigation. The FBI agent's response was immediate. Must be serious if you're calling this line. I'm sending you some documents: money laundering, contraband trafficking, judicial corruption. But I need something in return. Everything you have on Victor Langston's connections. You're calling in a big marker. Worth it. A pause as Collins reviewed the files. Jesus Christ. Give me 60 hours. Brian ended the call and turned to Daniel. Get Bethany Foster in here. Time to make her an official informant. Bethany arrived an hour later, nervous energy radiating from her designer athletic wear. Her hands shook as she accepted the coffee Daniel offered. I'll lose my teaching license, she blurted out. If this goes public, that's up to you, Brian cut in. Help us take down Tyler's operation. Testify when needed, and we'll make sure your cooperation is noted. Fight us, and you'll face charges as a co-conspirator. Bethany's facade crumbled. Lauren said it was just information gathering. She said Tyler needed leverage to keep you from investigating his clients. But then I saw the money moving through the gym's accounts, millions of dollars. Tell me about Vanessa Harper. Vanessa's the one you should really be investigating. Bethany leaned forward. Tyler's just the face. Vanessa handles all the connections, the real business. She has files on everyone. Judges, politicians, business leaders, anyone who could threaten the operation. Brian shared a look with Daniel. Where are these files hidden? Partition on the gym's computer system. Vanessa's careful, it's all encrypted. Bethany hesitated. But I know her password. She made me memorize it in case something happened to her. Brian pushed a laptop across the desk. Show us. As Bethany worked, Brian received a text from Madison. Mom's lawyer called again. She wants to see me. His response was immediate. Your choice, but I'm coming if you go, Madison replied. I don't want to see her. Okay, love, you got it, Bethany announced. The laptop screen filled with spreadsheets, documents, and photographs. Brian examined the files with growing satisfaction. Vanessa Harper hadn't just kept records, she'd built an insurance policy. Details of contraband purchases, dates, amounts, payments, financial transfers through shell companies, photos from private parties where Fairview's elite indulged their expensive habits. Send everything to Collins, he instructed Daniel. Bethany, you need to make a formal statement. What about protection? She asked. These people, they're dangerous. You'll have it, Brian assured her. But first, tell me about Judge Langston's involvement. Bethany's revelation about the judge's connection to Tyler's operation confirmed Brian's suspicions. Langston hadn't been randomly assigned to Lauren's case, he'd been picked specifically because he was compromised. Later that night, as Brian reviewed the evidence, Daniel brought more news. Lauren's asking to talk again, Daniel said. Says she has information about Tyler's supplier in Cleveland. Brian considered the request. Set it up. But first, let's see what else Bethany can tell us about the operations hierarchy. The pieces were falling into place. Each betrayal revealed new layers of corruption, new targets for his carefully planned retribution. Brian had spent his career upholding the law. Now he would use that same knowledge to dismantle his enemies piece by piece. His phone buzzed. Another text from Madison. Dad, can we train together tomorrow? I want to get stronger. Brian smiled, the expression holding no warmth. Of course, we both need to be ready for what's coming. The preliminary hearing for Vanessa Harper drew Fairview's power players like moths to flame. Brian sat in the back of the courtroom, observing the spectacle with calculated interest. Judge Victor Langston presided, his attempts at impartiality betrayed by subtle tells, a tightened jaw, a slight tremor in his hands. Daniel slipped into the seat beside Brian. Our friend at the DA office came through. You need to see this. The documents detailed a complex web of financial transactions between Langston's offshore accounts and shell companies linked to Tyler's gym. The judge had received over $1.8 million in the past 18 months alone. Brian typed a message on his phone. Send it all to the day anonymous tip. The hearing proceeded with mechanical efficiency until Vanessa's lawyer dropped the bomb. A motion to recuse Judge Langston due to conflict of interest. The courtroom erupted in whispers as the lawyer presented evidence of Langston's connections to Tyler's gym. The judge's face reddened, his gavel cracking against the bench. This is outrageous. These allegations are fully documented. The lawyer interrupted smoothly. We have bank records, Your Honor, and photographs. Brian watched Langston's composure crack. The judge declared a recess, practically fleeing the courtroom. Within hours, he had recused himself from all cases connected to the gym investigation. Later that afternoon, Brian received a call from his FBI contact. Langston's trying to move money out of his accounts, Collins said. Large transfers to the Cayman Islands. Let him dig his hole deeper, Brian replied. Who's the replacement judge? Elena Marquez. She's clean, we checked. Known for harsh sentences in corruption cases. Brian ended the call as Daniel entered his office. Tyler's lawyer reached out, Daniel said. He wants to make a deal. Of course he does, Brian replied. Langston was his protection. Now he's desperate. They drove to the county jail where Tyler was being held. The former gym owner had lost his polished appearance, his designer workout clothes replaced by prison orange. I can give you everything, Tyler offered, leaning across the interview table. Names, dates, amounts, the whole operation. In exchange for what? Immunity and protection. These people, they'll kill me if they think I'm talking. Brian studied the man who had helped destroy his marriage and threatened his daughter. You want to turn on Lauren? Make her the mastermind. Tyler's eagerness was palpable. She orchestrated everything. Used her position as your wife to access confidential files. I was just a willing participant who Brian's voice could have frozen hell. Try again. Look Tyler's composure cracked. Lauren approached me. Said you were getting too close to our high-end clients. She offered to help throw you off the trail. It was her idea to gather evidence against you. Brian stood. Write it all down. Names, dates, everything. But understand this. If you lie, if you hold anything back, I'll make sure everyone in prison knows you're an informant. The threat hung in the air as Brian left Tyler already scribbling frantically on a legal pad. Think he's telling the truth? Daniel asked as they drove back. Parts of it, Brian replied. Lauren's smart enough to play both sides. Let's see how she reacts when she learns Tyler's turning on her. The response came faster than expected. Lauren's lawyer contacted Brian within hours of Tyler's statement being filed. She wants to talk, the lawyer explained. Says she has information about Judge Langston that Tyler doesn't know. The prison meeting room felt smaller than Brian remembered. Lauren sat across from him, her designer confidence replaced by institutional weariness. Tyler's lying, she began without preamble. He's trying to save himself and you're not. I'm trying to fix what I can. She met his gaze. Victor Langston isn't just corrupt, he's one of their biggest clients. Vanessa has videos of him using illegal substances at private parties in the gym after hours. Brian maintained his neutral expression. Go on. The gym's contraband operation, it's bigger than Fairview. They have connections in Cleveland, New York. Langston helped them avoid federal investigation by tipping them off about warrants, sharing sealed documents. Why tell me this now? Because Tyler will get it wrong. He only knows what they let him know. Vanessa, she's the one with all the real information. The one you should be talking to. Brian stood. Write it all down. Your lawyer knows how to reach me. Lauren's voice stopped him at the door. Brian, I never meant for any of this to hurt Madison. He turned back, his expression carved from stone. But it did. Actions have consequences, Lauren. You're about to learn exactly how severe those consequences can be. Back at his office, Brian compared Lauren's statement with Tyler's confession. Both were lying, but their lies illuminated truth in the gaps between stories. Set up a meeting with Vanessa Harper, he instructed Daniel. Let's see how she reacts when she learns both her partners are talking. Already done. Daniel handed him a note. Her lawyer says she's ready to deal, but she wants guaranteed protection. Brian smiled, the expression devoid of warmth. Of course she does. She knows what's in those files she kept. A text from Madison interrupted his planning. Passed my first belt test in karate. Proud of you, Brian replied. Proud of you. Keep getting stronger. The pieces were moving faster now, each betrayal triggering new revelations. Brian had spent weeks building this web, and now his enemies were entangling themselves in its strands. One more thing, Daniel added. Bethany Foster's been going through the gym's financial records, found something interesting about their Cleveland connection. Brian leaned forward. Tell me. The information Bethany provided would prove crucial in the coming weeks. But for now, Brian focused on the immediate task, leveraging Vanessa Harper's desperation into a complete exposure of Fairview's corrupt power structure. Give me everything on Judge Marquez, Brian instructed. We need to know she's truly clean before this goes to trial. Daniel nodded, understanding the stakes. One compromised judge had already threatened their case. They couldn't risk another. Brian turned to the wall of evidence. He'd assembled each document and photographed a weapon in his arsenal. The system he'd served for decades was now his instrument of destruction, aimed at those who had betrayed not just him, but the very principles of justice he'd sworn to uphold. Summer heat baked Fairview as Brian's plans progressed. The gym remained open, now managed by Vanessa's assistant, but its client list had thinned considerably. Fear of exposure kept the wealthy patrons away, their absence more incriminating than their presence had been. Bethany Foster had proven invaluable, her access to the gym's records revealing layers of financial manipulation. She sat in Brian's office reviewing spreadsheets with Daniel. Here, she pointed to a series of transactions. They laundered money through fake fitness competitions, entry fees, sponsorships, equipment purchases, all inflated to hide contraband money. Brian studied the documents. How many competitions? 7 last year. Each one brought in over $1 million. Lauren helped organize them, used her position at the school to involve students as volunteers. Made it look legitimate. The mention of his wife's role hardened Brian's expression. What about the Cleveland connection? That's where it gets interesting. Bethany pulled up more records. Large cash transfers to a company called Harbor Imports, but they don't actually import anything. It's owned by Victor Cruz. Brian finished. Known to the DEA as a major distributor. Daniel entered with fresh coffee and news. Cody Landry was arrested last night. Bar fight. He's looking at serious time as a repeat offender. Brian's interest sharpened. The former MMA fighter who had attacked him might prove useful. Give me his booking details. The county jail's interview room stank of desperation and stale sweat. Cody Landry's muscled frame seemed diminished by prison orange, his fighter's confidence replaced by poorly concealed fear. 3 strikes, Brian noted, reviewing the arrest report. That's 20 years minimum unless I can help you. Landry blurted. Tyler ordered the hit. I've got proof, texts, recorded conversations. Show me. Landry's phone, retrieved from evidence, contained dozens of messages. Tyler's instructions were explicit. Hurt Brian badly enough to send a message, but don't kill him. Who else was involved in planning it? Brian asked. Vanessa knew. She wanted you scared off the investigation. But the order came from Cleveland, from Cruz. He was worried you were getting too close to the distribution network. Brian leaned forward. Tell me about Cruz. Major player. Supplies high-end stuff to rich clients through fronts like Tyler's gym, but he's careful. Uses guys like me to handle anything dirty. Write it all down. Names, dates, locations. Your cooperation will be noted at sentencing. Back at his office, Brian reviewed Landry's statement with Daniel. Get this to the FBI. They've been building a case against Cruz for years. Daniel nodded. What about Tyler and Vanessa? Let them stew. When they learn Landry's talking, they'll get desperate. Brian's voice stayed flat. Desperate people make mistakes. The predicted reaction came swiftly. Tyler's lawyer requested another meeting, claiming his client had forgotten crucial details about the operation. Brian let him wait 4 days before responding. The former gym owner had visibly deteriorated, his arrogance replaced by naked fear. Cruz will kill me, Tyler babbled. You don't know what he's capable of. I know exactly what he's capable of, Brian cut him off. Just like I know what you're capable of. The attack in the parking garage, that was your idea, not Cruz's. Tyler's face went slack. How did you dash? Landry kept records. Smart man. Insurance against people like you. Brian's gaze didn't soften. Now tell me about the distribution network. The confession spilled out in a torrent of details. Tyler revealed the entire structure of Cruz's operation, distribution routes, payment methods, client lists. He described how the gym laundered money through equipment purchases and training programs. The competitions were Vanessa's idea, Tyler explained, desperation making him talkative. Perfect cover cash transactions, inflated entry fees, fake sponsorships. Lauren handled the school connections, made it look legitimate. And Judge Langston? Brian asked. Major client. Spent thousands each month on illegal substances. Tyler swallowed. Vanessa has videos of him using them at private parties. That's how they controlled him, kept him compromised so he'd protect the operation. Brian absorbed the information without visible reaction. What about the other judges? Politicians? Vanessa handled all that. She kept files on everyone, blackmail material. Said it was insurance. A guard interrupted, signaling the end of visiting hours. Brian stood, leaving Tyler still talking, still trying to save himself. Outside, Daniel waited with more news. Lauren's not taking Tyler's betrayal well, Daniel said carefully. She tried to dash, he hesitated. Tried to take her life in her cell. They got to her in time, but she's in the prison infirmary. Brian processed this information with cold detachment. How's Madison taking it? She hasn't heard yet. The prison called your sister first. Keep it that way for now, Brian said. She's been through enough. Brian checked his phone, 3 missed calls from the prison psychiatrist. Give me Lauren's medical report. This affects her ability to testify. They drove to FBI headquarters where Agent Collins waited with his task force. Brian laid out the evidence. Landry's confession, Tyler's statement, the gym's financial records, and Bethany's testimony. Cruz is the key, Collins noted, studying the files. We've been after him for years, but could never get close enough. Now you have multiple witnesses and documentary evidence. Brian pointed out, plus his direct connection to the attack on a police chief. We'll need protection for your witnesses, Collins said. Cruz has a reputation for eliminating threats. Already arranged, Collins added after checking a folder. Bethany Foster under guard. Landry in isolated custody. Tyler and Vanessa are about to learn the value of full cooperation. Back at his office, Brian received an unexpected visit. Bethany stood in his doorway clutching a stack of papers. I found something else, she said, her voice shaking. In the gym's backup files, videos of private parties. Not just Judge Langston. City council members. Business leaders. Even the DA's brother. Brian examined the files. The videos provided irrefutable evidence of Fairview's elite engaging in illegal substance use and other compromising behavior. This is what Vanessa meant by insurance, he mused. Bethany's eyes were wide. What are you going to do with it? The right thing, Brian replied, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. That evening, as Brian reviewed the day's developments, Madison came to his office. Her karate uniform showed signs of intense training. I heard about Mom, she said quietly. From Aunt Angela. Brian set aside his files. You okay? No, but I'm stronger now. She met his gaze. We both are. He nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. They had been transformed by betrayal, not broken, but reformed into harder versions of themselves. The dojo is offering advanced self-defense classes, Madison continued. Real stuff, not just tournament fighting. Sign up for whatever you want, Brian said. Training never stops. As Madison left, Daniel arrived with final confirmation. The FBI had officially taken over the Cruz investigation. The operation would expand beyond Fairview, targeting the entire distribution network. Brian sat back, reviewing his next moves. Lauren's attempt to take her life would delay proceedings, but it also proved she'd lost hope of manipulating the situation. Tyler's desperation and Vanessa's carefully maintained files had provided all the leverage needed. The pieces were in place. Fairview's corrupt power structure would fall, its pillars of respectability revealed as criminals and addicts. But that would just be the beginning, the first phase of a retribution planned with precise attention to detail. His phone buzzed. Agent Collins. Cruz is moving product tonight. Teams in position. Brian's reply was brief. Take him. The operation would expand beyond his jurisdiction now, spreading to other cities, other investigations. But Brian's focus remained on Fairview, on the specific individuals who had betrayed him, endangered his daughter, and violated his trust. Daniel brought in the latest surveillance photos. Judge Langston meeting with other members of Fairview's elite at a private club. Their faces showed the strain of people realizing their protected world was crumbling. They're getting nervous, Daniel observed. Good. Brian added the photos to his evidence wall. Fear makes them predictable. The summer heat began to fade as autumn approached, but Brian's resolve only hardened. Each piece of evidence, each confession, each revealed connection strengthened his position. The law would handle the criminal charges, but there would be other reckonings, personal ones delivered with the same attention to detail he'd brought to his police work. Lauren remained in the prison infirmary, her failed attempt adding another layer to the tragedy she created. But Brian felt no pity. She'd chosen her path, betrayed her family, endangered their daughter. Those choices carried consequences. In his office, Brian reviewed the complete file one final time. The evidence was overwhelming. Contraband trafficking, money laundering, corruption at the highest levels of Fairview's government and judiciary. But more importantly, he had the personal betrayals documented in detail: Lauren's calculated deception, Tyler's arrogance, Vanessa's manipulations. The FBI would handle Cruz in the larger investigation, but Fairview's day of reckoning would come from within, orchestrated by the man they tried to destroy. Brian Holloway had spent his career upholding the law. Now he would use that same knowledge to ensure justice was served, not just legally, but personally, completely, and without mercy. The retirement party at the Fairview Police Department buzzed with subdued energy. Officers mingled around the conference room, paper plates loaded with potluck offerings, their conversations a mix of nostalgia and uncertainty about the future. Brian Holloway stood near the podium, accepting handshakes and well wishes with practiced ease. His replacement, Captain Monica Alvarez, approached with a determined stride. "Your recommendation means a lot," she said quietly. "The commission voted unanimously." "You earned it," Brian replied. "Fairview needs someone who can't be bought." Monica nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "I've reviewed the personnel files you flagged. Changes are coming." "Good. Start with internal affairs." They missed too many connections to Tyler's operation. Across the room, Daniel Ortiz worked the crowd with purpose. Each conversation gathered intelligence. Each handshake was an opportunity to observe reactions when Brian's name came up. "Chief Holloway," Angela Park interrupted. Judge Langston's clerk called again. "He's pushing to schedule Lauren's sentencing hearing." "Let him push." Brian's voice held no emotion. "Tell the clerk the prosecution needs more time to review new evidence." The evidence existed only as rumors Brian had carefully planted, but Langston's increasing desperation proved the judge had taken the bait. Later that evening in Brian's temporary office, Daniel reported his findings. Langston's selling assets. His lake house went on the market yesterday, well below value. He's tried to contact Tyler 3 times through his lawyer. And the surveillance, he visited 4 banks today, tried to empty accounts, but the freezes are in place. He's running scared. Brian reviewed the photos Daniel had taken. Langston at his bank, at his lawyer's office, at the private airstrip where he kept his Cessna. The judge's polished appearance had cracked, showing the desperation beneath. What about Tyler? Out on bail as of this afternoon. Vanessa's lawyer arranged it. Daniel handed over more surveillance photos. He went straight to the airstrip, checked on his plane. "Perfect," Brian said, studying the images. "Time to spring the trap. Plant the story about the escape route through our contact at the DA office," Brian ordered. "Make sure both Langston and Tyler hear about it separately." "Already done," Daniel said. The anonymous tip about federal agents watching commercial flights went out this morning. Brian picked up his phone, dialing a secure number. "Agent Collins. Time to move. Have your teams in position at Fairview Airfield by midnight. Runway 2. The plan unfolded through careful manipulation of information channels. Both Langston and Tyler received the same message. A private plane would be waiting at midnight, fueled and ready, with clean papers and a flight plan that would avoid federal attention. In reality, federal agents surrounded the airfield, hidden in the darkness. Brian and Daniel watched through night vision equipment as 2 cars approached from different directions. Langston arrived first, his Mercedes pulling up to the private hangar. Minutes later, Tyler's Range Rover appeared. "Both rats in the same trap," Daniel commented. Brian said nothing, focusing his directional microphone on the scene. "What are you doing here?" Langston's voice crackled through the receiver, panic evident. "This is my escape route." Tyler's composure had completely shattered. "Vanessa arranged it. She arranged it for me, you idiot," Langston snapped. "She played both of you dash," Brian's voice cut through their argument as he stepped into the hangar's lights. Just like you played everyone else. Both men froze. Langston recovered first, reaching into his jacket. That's not wise. Daniel emerged from the shadows, weapon trained on the judge. Federal agents have the building surrounded. You don't understand. Langston's hand trembled. They'll kill us all. Cruz's organization is being dismantled as we speak, Brian interrupted. But please, keep talking. The cameras are recording everything. Tyler's face went pale as he spotted the surveillance equipment. Cameras? Federal agents. Everyone on the ground. The FBI tactical team swarmed the hangar, taking down both men with professional efficiency. Brian watched passively as they were cuffed and read their rights. Agent Collins approached, grinning. Beautiful setup, Brian. Their conversation gave us everything we needed. Send me copies of the recordings, Brian replied. Insurance for the future. Later that night, as the federal agents processed the scene, Daniel reviewed their victory. Langston will roll over on the other judges, Daniel said. Tyler's already begging to make a deal. Let them fight each other for immunity. Brian's voice held no mercy. By the time they're done, we'll have the entire network. His phone buzzed a text from Madison. Heard the news about Tyler and the judge. You okay? Never better. He replied, remember your training tomorrow 6 a.m. Brian turned to Daniel, his expression resolute. Phase 1 complete. Tomorrow we start dismantling the rest of their world. The sedan carrying Langston and Tyler disappeared into the night, headed for federal holding. Brian watched it go, knowing that tomorrow Fairview would wake to find its power structure crumbling. The retirement party's decorations still hung in the conference room as Brian gathered his belongings. Captain Alvarez stood in his doorway. The department won't be the same without you, she said. It'll be better, Brian replied. Because you'll make it that way. He left his badge on the desk, but his power hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown stronger. Now he could operate without the constraints of official authority delivering justice in ways the system never could. The trap at the airfield was just the beginning. Brian had spent months planning each phase of his retaliation. Langston and Tyler's arrest would trigger a cascade of revelations, each one calculated to destroy another piece of the corrupt machine they'd built. In his car, Brian reviewed the next steps. The evidence gathered tonight would lead to warrants, searches, and more arrests. Fairview's elite would learn that their money and connections couldn't protect them from the consequences of their choices. Daniel texted an update. FBI moving on 3 more locations. Cruz's organization is falling apart. Brian smiled, the expression devoid of warmth. The trap had worked perfectly, each player performing exactly as he predicted. Now the real dismantling could begin. The morning after Langston and Tyler's arrest, Fairview erupted in chaos. Federal agents raided homes and offices across town, armed with warrants based on evidence from the airport confrontation. Brian watched the operations unfold from his home office, monitoring police frequencies and text updates from Daniel. They found Langston's safe, Daniel reported. Multiple phones, offshore account documents, and enough illegal substances to put him away for decades. What about his court records? Being reviewed now. Hundreds of cases potentially compromised by his connection to Tyler's operation. Brian turned to his wall of evidence, adding new photos and documents. The web of corruption expanded with each revelation, consuming more of Fairview's prominent citizens. His phone rang. Agent Collins. You were right about Vanessa Harper, Collins said. She's talking, giving us everything on Cruz's distribution network. Smart woman, Brian replied. She knows there's no loyalty among criminals. The next few days brought a cascade of arrests and resignations. Tyler's client list became public names from Fairview's social registry. Business leaders, politicians, even religious figures, all exposed as participants in the contraband ring. Brian's home phone rang. Lauren's prison number appeared on the caller ID. He let it go to voicemail, focusing instead on the latest FBI reports. Daniel arrived with coffee and updates. Lauren's trial date is set. Judge Marquez is presiding. She'll get no special treatment. Marquez built her reputation prosecuting corrupt officials. Lauren's lawyer is pushing for a deal, Daniel continued. Says she has more names to offer. Brian's expression hardened. Too late for deals. She made her choice. The trial proceeded quickly. Lauren, faced with overwhelming evidence and abandoned by her former conspirators, accepted the prosecution's offer, 9 years in federal prison. In the courtroom, she tried to catch Brian's eye. He stared straight ahead, his face a mask of indifference. Only Madison's slight trembling beside him betrayed any emotion. The defendant has expressed remorse, Judge Marquez intoned. However, the severity of these crimes, particularly the breach of public trust and endangerment of a minor, demands significant punishment. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Brian guided Madison through the crowd, his bulk shielding her from cameras. "Dad," she gripped his arm. "Can we move? I don't want to stay in that house anymore." "Already looking at new places," he assured her. "Something fresh, where no one knows our history." That evening, as Brian reviewed property listings, his secure phone buzzed. "Cruz is making moves," Daniel reported. 2 subs spotted heading toward Fairview. "Right on schedule," Brian said, checking his watch. "Alert our friends and federal law enforcement." The confrontation came at midnight. Cruz's men found Brian at his gym, allegedly alone. They didn't notice the surveillance teams, the hidden cameras, or the federal agents waiting in position. "Mr. Holloway," Cruz's lead enforcer tried for intimidation. "Our employer wants to discuss recent events." "Your employer is under federal indictment," Brian replied calmly, "along with his entire organization. That's why we're here," the enforcer said, "to explain the consequences of cooperation." Brian's smile held no warmth. "I understand consequences perfectly. For instance, attacking a former police chief while federal agents watch. Those consequences are quite severe." The enforcers realized their mistake too late. FBI teams swarmed the gym, taking them down with practiced efficiency. Cruz's attempt at intimidation became another piece of evidence against him. Add attempted witness intimidation to his charges, Brian instructed Agent Collins, "and make sure they know I provided the information that led to their arrest." The next week brought more dominoes falling. Vanessa Harper, facing multiple federal charges, turned state's evidence. Her testimony implicated dozens more conspirators. Through it all, Brian focused on Madison. They found a new house in a quiet neighborhood, far from the epicenter of Fairview's collapse. He supported her therapy sessions, watched her channel her anger into training. "I want to study criminal justice," Madison announced over dinner. "Learn how to fight corruption the right way." Brian nodded, understanding her need to make sense of the betrayal. "You'll do it better than I did." "No." She met his gaze. "You did what had to be done. They all deserved it." Late that night, Brian received another update. Cruz had been arrested trying to flee the country. The distributor's empire was crumbling, his connections exposed, his protection evaporating. Daniel brought the surveillance photos. Cruz rolled over immediately, gave up everyone, including his contacts in other cities. "Good." Brian studied the images. "Make copies for our files. Never know when we might need leverage." The phone rang. "Bethany Foster." "I'm leaving teaching," she announced. "Can't face the whispers. The judgment." "You did the right thing in the end," Brian replied. "That counts for something." "Does it?" "Lauren was my friend. I introduced her to Tyler Dash, and then you helped bring them down," Brian said. "Remember that part." After hanging up, Brian reviewed his evidence wall one final time. The photos and documents told a story of corruption, betrayal, and justice served cold. His phone buzzed with a text from the prison. Lauren attempting contact again. He deleted it without reading, just as he'd done with her letters. Daniel arrived with final confirmation. Langston accepted a plea deal. 16 years for corruption, conspiracy, and contraband charges. The judge who sentenced crooked cops, Daniel mused. Going to prison himself. Ironic. Brian agreed. Make sure he serves his time in a facility far from his friends. Let him learn what real isolation feels like. As autumn turned colder, Fairview's power structure lay in ruins. Tyler's empire had been seized and redistributed. Langston's career and reputation were destroyed. Lauren faced 9 years of federal time. Brian's own reputation remained intact. The honorable police chief betrayed by his wife, who had helped expose corruption at the highest levels. Only a select few knew the full extent of his involvement, how carefully he'd orchestrated each fall from grace. In his new home office, Brian added the final documents to his files. The evidence would stay secure insurance against any future attempts at retaliation. His phone buzzed. Madison. Heading home from training, she'd grown stronger through the ordeal. learning lessons about trust and justice that most people never faced. Daniel arrived with the last piece of news. Tyler's assets have been completely liquidated. He's got nothing left but prison commissary money. Good. Brian closed the file. Let him learn what it means to lose everything. The sun set on Fairview, a town transformed by justice, served without mercy. Brian Holloway had kept his promise. Anyone who betrayed him would pay the full price, measured in shattered lives and destroyed futures. 1 year after the arrests, Brian stood in his new backyard watching Madison practice martial arts forms. Her movements showed the confidence of someone who had faced darkness and emerged stronger. Daniel Ortiz pulled into the driveway, now running his own security consulting firm with Brian as silent partner. They specialized in exposing corruption and fraud methods technically legal, but ruthlessly effective. New client called, Daniel reported. Similar situation to Fairview. Police chief in Indiana dealing with corruption in his department. Send me the details, Brian replied. We'll show him how to handle betrayal properly. Inside, Brian reviewed the latest updates. Lauren's letters from prison remained unopened in a drawer. Tyler, serving 22 years for contraband trafficking and conspiracy, had lost his last appeal. Bethany Foster visited occasionally, her presence helping Madison process the betrayal. She had found a new position in another state, rebuilding her life far from Fairview's shadows. Judge Langston's 16-year sentence had begun in a maximum security facility. His attempts to leverage old connections had failed, leaving him isolated and powerless. Brian's home office displayed no photos from his police days, no reminders of his former life. Those memories belonged to a different man, one who believed in second chances and redemption. Dad. Madison stood in the doorway. Think Mom will try to contact us when she gets out? She might, Brian replied honestly. But that's 8 years away. We'll be different people by then. Better people, Madison agreed. Stronger. They were survivors, transformed by betrayal into something harder, more resilient. The past year had taught them valuable lessons about trust, justice, and the true nature of retribution. Daniel brought in files for their latest case. This one's interesting: political corruption tied to real estate development. Lots of powerful people involved. Brian smiled, the expression holding no warmth. Perfect time to teach more lessons about consequences. The sun set on their new beginning, but the darkness held no fear. They had learned to use it to thrive in it, to deliver justice from within its shadows. Some would call it revenge, but Brian knew better. This was justice served cold, calculated, and complete. Epilogue: 10 years later, Brian Holloway's security consulting firm occupied the top floor of a Cleveland office building, its dark tinted windows overlooking the city where his retaliation had first taken root. At 54, his hair had grayed at the temples, but his presence remained commanding, his eyes as sharp as when he'd first discovered his wife's betrayal a decade ago. Another police department requesting our services, Daniel Ortiz announced, entering Brian's office with a tablet. Now in his 40s, Daniel had grown into his role as the firm's public face, while Brian preferred to operate behind the scenes. Location? Brian asked, studying the latest surveillance photos on his desk. Sacramento. Their internal affairs department is compromised. Chief suspect's contraband money, just like Fairview. Brian's lips curved in a cold smile. History repeats itself. What's our angle? Chief's brother-in-law is on the take, Daniel said. Family betrayal. Your specialty. The Holloway Ortiz Security Consulting Group had built a reputation for handling sensitive cases that regular law enforcement couldn't touch. Their methods were technically legal, but brutally effective, specializing in exposing corruption and orchestrating the downfall of those who abused power. Any word from our contacts about Lauren's parole hearing? Daniel asked, knowing the topic remained relevant even after all these years. Denied, Brian replied without emotion. The board wasn't impressed by her rehabilitation claims. She's serving the full 9 years. Lauren Holloway had discovered that betrayal carried long-term consequences. Her attempts to rebuild her life in prison, earning her GED, instructor certification, counseling other inmates, had failed to convince the parole board. Her letters to Brian and Madison, sent regularly for 10 years, remained unopened in a filing cabinet. Madison called, Daniel mentioned. She's finished her FBI training, top of her class. Pride flickered across Brian's face. His daughter had transformed her trauma into purpose, graduating from college with honors before entering the FBI Academy at 25. She specialized in investigating corruption cases, using lessons learned from Fairview to protect others from similar betrayals. She's been assigned to the Cleveland field office, Brian noted, starting next month. Following in your footsteps, Daniel said. But with a badge. A better path, Brian agreed. She's fighting corruption from inside the system. Their conversation was interrupted by a secure message alert. Bethany Foster, their longtime ally, had sent an urgent update from her position at the state anti-corruption task force. Tyler Bennett is trying to leverage his prison connections, Bethany reported. He's offering information about other operations in exchange for a transfer to minimum security. Brian's expression hardened. Tyler had spent 10 years discovering that his charm and manipulation tactics meant nothing in federal prison. His business empire had been seized, his wealth redistributed, his name synonymous with betrayal and Fairview. Block the transfer, Brian instructed. Remind our friends in the Bureau of Prisons about his history of witness manipulation. Already done, Bethany replied. Also, Judge Langston's appeal was rejected. He's serving the full 16 years. Judge Langston's fall had become a cautionary tale in legal circles. The corrupt judge had lost everything: his reputation, his wealth, his connections. His attempts to rebuild influence from prison had failed consistently thanks to Brian's careful maintenance of their surveillance network. What about Vanessa Harper? Daniel asked, reviewing their latest intelligence. Vanessa played her cards skillfully, Brian reported. Turned state's evidence to receive a reduced sentence. After 6 years, she was released into witness protection, living under a new identity in Seattle. Daniel nodded. Still clean. Working as an accountant. She stayed clean. Knows better than to reconnect with old associates. Their firm maintained surveillance on all major players from the Fairview conspiracy, ensuring none could rebuild their former power base. Victor Cruz, the Cleveland distributor, had died in prison 4 years ago, officially from natural causes, though rumors suggested his former partners had arranged the timing. Captain Alvarez called, Daniel reported. Fairview's crime rates are at historic lows. She's implemented all the reforms you recommended. Monica Alvarez had transformed the Fairview Police Department, her uncompromising integrity becoming legendary in law enforcement circles. The corruption that had once infested the department was gone, replaced by strict oversight and accountability measures. Brian's phone buzzed. A message from Madison. Dad, got an interesting case. Mind if I stop by later? Could use your perspective always, he replied. Madison Holloway had grown into a formidable investigator, combining her father's ruthless pursuit of justice with a deep understanding of institutional corruption. Her experience with Lauren's betrayal had given her unique insight into family dynamics in criminal enterprises. The Sacramento case. Daniel refocused their attention. How do you want to handle it? Brian studied the preliminary reports. Start with surveillance on the brother-in-law. Get his financial records, communications patterns. Find his weak points. Like old times. Exactly like old times, Brian said. Corruption hasn't changed, just the players and places. Their methodology had been refined over years of similar cases. They would gather evidence, build an irrefutable case, then orchestrate a takedown that left no room for recovery. Brian's reputation ensured cooperation from law enforcement agencies nationwide, all eager to tap his expertise in exposing corruption. A news alert drew their attention. Cody Landry, the former MMA fighter who had attacked Brian in that parking garage a decade ago, was being released from prison. Keep an eye on him, Brian instructed. Make sure he remembers the consequences of poor choices. Daniel nodded, adding Landry to their surveillance list. The firm maintained extensive files on everyone connected to the Fairview case, their activities monitored through a network of contacts and informants. Got the latest from the prison psychiatrist, Daniel reported. Lauren's not taking the parole denial well. She's requesting another meeting. Brian's response was immediate. No meetings. No contact. Some betrayals don't get second chances. Lauren's attempts at reconciliation had continued throughout her imprisonment. She'd written letters expressing remorse, completed counseling programs, even tried to contact Madison through intermediaries. Each attempt met the same stone wall of silence. Madison's bringing files from her new case, Daniel noted, checking his messages. Looks like corruption in the Cleveland Port Authority. Contraband shipments being waived through customs. Full circle, Brian observed. Their first major case after Fairview had involved port corruption. They developed their methodology, their gathering evidence, identifying pressure points, orchestrating systematic takedowns of entire corrupt networks. They worked late into the evening, 3 survivors of betrayal, now dedicated to exposing corruption wherever it festered. The firm's methods had evolved, but their core principle remained unchanged. Justice served without mercy to those who abused trust. Brian's phone buzzed again, another prison notification. Lauren's latest letter arriving in the digital archive. Like all the others, it would remain unread. Some betrayals created wounds that never healed, only transformed into armor against future pain. Port Authority raid scheduled for next week, Madison announced. FBI's given us full tactical support. Just like Fairview, Daniel mused. But this time we're ahead of the curve. Brian nodded, satisfied with their evolution. The firm had become what he'd envisioned years ago, a mechanism for delivering justice to those who thought themselves above the law. Bethany's face appeared on their secure video feed. Update spotted familiar patterns in Chicago. Police union president showing signs of compromise. Send the files, Brian instructed. History keeps repeating. Their reputation had grown beyond exposing simple corruption. Law enforcement agencies nationwide knew that Holloway Ortiz specialized in complex cases involving betrayal of trust, dirty cops, corrupt judges, officials who sold their integrity for profit. As the sun set over Cleveland, they planned their next operations. Brian Holloway's firm had become a silent force for justice, unknown to the public, but feared by corrupt officials nationwide. Daniel spoke quietly. Think Lauren expected any of this when she betrayed you? She expected me to break, Brian replied. Instead, we got stronger. Madison nodded, understanding the truth in his words. They had transformed betrayal into purpose, pain into power, victims into victors. Brian opened the new case file, his smile holding no warmth. Another corrupt official was about to discover that some forces in the justice system never forgot, never forgave, and never left betrayal unpunished. That's the end of the story. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching.